The honest answer comes first, because everything after it is complications. Nobody knows what Greek fire was made of. Not a chemist, not a Byzantinist, not a museum. The best modern reconstruction was built in 2002 by the Byzantine historian John Haldon with Morris Buy-in, and it ran on crude oil thickened with wood resin, pressurized in a bronze tank and driven out through a swiveling nozzle. It threw a jet of flame up to about 15 meters, burning at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. It worked beautifully. That still isn't the recipe, because a thing that behaves the way the sources describe is not the same as the thing they describe, and that gap is this whole episode. The Byzantines called it sea fire, liquid fire, median fire, manufactured fire. A monk named Theophanes says a man called Kallinikos, an artificer from Heliopolis, brought it to Constantinople around the year 672 and burned an Arab fleet with all hands aboard. For roughly 5 centuries, it helped keep an empire breathing. Then it stops appearing in the record, and it never comes back. Start with that monk, because his testimony is thinner than its reputation. Theophanes the Confessor was writing in the 810s, from a monastery near Cyzicus on the Sea of Marmara, some 140 years after the events, and his account of the greatest weapon in Byzantine history is 4 lines long. At that time, Kallinikos, an artificer from Heliopolis, fled to the Romans. He had devised a sea fire which ignited the Arab ships and burned them with all hands. That's the entire foundation. No ingredients are named, no proportions, nothing at all about the apparatus. And Theophanes tangles his own chronology. Ships carrying fire-throwing nozzles turn up in his narrative, a couple of years before the man who supposedly invented them. So he is now generally read as someone who improved a weapon already in service, not as the man who thought of it. The siege that made the weapon famous is under repair too. The textbook version has an Arab fleet crossing the Marmara to assault Constantinople every year from 674 to 678, wintering at Cyzicus, until the ships of Constantine the Fourth, fitted with Greek fire, routed them. James Howard-Johnston of Oxford argued in his 2010 book, Witnesses to a World Crisis, that no such siege happened at all. The blockade is missing from the Eastern sources that ought to record it, and he calls it a myth that has been allowed to mask a very real Byzantine success, one at sea off Lycia and then on land. Marek Jankowiak accepts that a real siege happened, but moves it, dating the first Arab attempt on the capital to 667 through 669, with the main assault in early 668, in a study published in the journal Travaux et Memoires in 2013. Notice what that does. The founding legend of Greek fire rests on a chronicle that may have the wrong decade. Fire reel date smudged. What survives in far better shape is the plumbing. Byzantine war galleys, the dromons, carried a bronze tube mounted at the bow under the forecastle, and Anna Komnene, writing in the 1140s about her father Alexios, records the finishing touch. On the prow of each ship, he had a head fixed of a lion or other land animal, made in brass or iron with the mouth open and then gilded over, and the fire passed out through the beast's jaws, so that it seemed as if the lions were vomiting fire. The Tactica of Emperor Leo VI describes a portable version. The siphon, a hand tube Leo claims to have invented himself, and a Byzantine siege manual copied into a Vatican manuscript shows one being worked from a flying bridge against a wall. There's a painting of the naval weapon in the Madrid skylitzes, a 12th century illustrated chronicle now in Spain's National Library, where one ship hoses another and the flame lands on men. That picture is the closest thing to a photograph anyone will ever have. Here's the detail that shows how tightly the secret was held. In 812, the Bulgarian ruler Krum stormed the Black Sea fortress of Mesembria and carried off 36 copper siphons, plus a quantity of the fire itself. Constantinople was appalled. Krum did nothing with any of it. He had the hardware and the substance in his hands and could not make the weapon function, which is precisely what a compartmentalized state program looks like from the outside. The man who prepared the liquid didn't know the pump. The man on the pump didn't know the mixture. No single stolen object handed over the system. The empire's own attitude survives in writing, and it isn't a formula. It's a curse. Constantine the Seventh, composing a private handbook for his son Romanos around the year 950, the book we now call Do Administrando Imperio, instructs in Chapter 13 that the liquid fire be manufactured only among Christians and only in the imperial city, never sent nor taught to any other nation whatsoever. His justification is that an angel revealed it to Constantine the Great and bound him to that condition. Then the emperor tells his boy a cautionary tale about an official who took a bribe to hand some over and was struck down by flame from heaven as he stepped into a church. Consider what that document is doing. A 10th century head of state wrapped his best weapon in the threat of divine execution. It worked, and that is exactly why nothing useful was ever written down. Which leaves a single passage across 500 years that comes anywhere near a recipe, and it's a trap. Anna Komnene, describing the defense of Dyrrhachium against Bohemond in 1108, writes that combustible rosin is collected from the pine and other similar evergreen trees and mixed with sulfur, then introduced into reed pipes and blown by the man using it with a strong continuous breath, so that it bursts into flame and falls like a streak of lightning on the faces of the men opposite. Read the scene around it, though. 2 mining crews have broken into each other under a city wall, and the defenders are blowing burning gunk down reeds into a tunnel, singeing beards. No pump appears. There's no bronze tank, no ship, no pressure. Is she describing the Navy's sea fire here, or a cheap battlefield cousin of it? That's the kind of question scholars can argue about for a century. They have. So the chemistry has to be reverse-engineered from behavior, and 4 candidates have taken their turn at it. The oldest serious one is saltpeter, floated by the Dutch scholar Isaac Vossius in the 17th century and carried forward by a line of French chemists, most famously Marcellin Berthelot, who set it out in La Chimie au Moyen Age in 1893. Chronology killed it. Saltpeter doesn't appear in warfare in Europe or the Middle East before the 13th century, and it's absent from the Arabic chemical literature that would certainly have noticed it. Quicklime came next, and it's the version you'll still hear on television, because quicklime reacts with water and the fire burned on water. The Greek chemist Constantine Zenghelis tested that in 1932 and found the reaction feeble in open sea. Worse for the idea, Leo VI's Tactica has the substance poured straight onto enemy decks, where there is no water to trigger anything. A calcium phosphide version got a hearing too, on the reasoning that phosphine catches fire in air by itself, and repeated trials never came close to the intensity the chronicles describe. That leaves petroleum, which is where most modern scholars have ended up. Crude or refined oil, thickened with resin to make it cling and burn longer, something close to a medieval napalm. The standing reference is James Riddick Partington, a British chemist turned historian of chemistry, whose 1960 book A History of Greek Fire and Gunpowder is still where a serious reader begins. The title names the 2 things the book exists to keep apart. Greek fire was not gunpowder. The saltpeter arrives centuries later. Partington also doubted the lone inventor story and thought the weapon was worked out by chemists in Constantinople who had inherited the discoveries of the Alexandrian chemical school. The supply lines fit the chemistry. Crude seeps to the surface in the country between the Black Sea and the Caspian, and Constantine the Seventh's own manual notes the wells around Timutoraken, a Byzantine outpost on the Kerch Strait that the empire guarded jealously into the 12th century. One of the weapon's Greek names was Median fire, and Media was a chief source of naphtha. Haldon and Bion took that chemistry and built a machine around it on paper, publishing the design in the journal Byzantinische Zeitschrift in 1977. A bronze force pump to pressurize the mix, a sealed tank heated over a brazier, a swiveling bronze nozzle with the fuel lit at its mouth. In 2002, they finally built the thing, full scale, for British television, with crude oil and wood resin. It did what the chronicles say it did. The fuel did not fully vaporize on the way out, so the jet ran downward instead of arcing up, and that is exactly the behavior a low medieval galley requires. A high arc would sail clean over the target. Now the part I find most useful, because it keeps the mystery honest. Even modern welding could not seal the bronze tank adequately under pressure. Haldon's team had to move the pressure pump to sit between tank and nozzle before the rig would work. A 21st century workshop, with alloys and instruments no Byzantine ever had, redesigned the layout to avoid blowing itself up. Whatever the imperial arsenal was doing on the deck of a warship in a battle, it was doing it without routinely killing its own crews, and nobody today can fully account for how. So why did it stop? The disappearance has no single cause, which is the frustrating and probably correct answer. Siphon fire fades out of the sources in the late 12th century. At the 1203 siege of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade, the defenders launched fireships that the sources describe as hastily improvised, and no account confirms Greek fire among them. In April 1204, the Crusaders sacked the city, and the empire spent the following 57 years dismembered. Take your pick of explanations, and you can probably have two. Imperial territory had shrunk back from the oil the weapon needed. The navy had been left to rot. The knowledge was deliberately split among specialists and never gathered into one document, and specialists retire and arsenals close. And the men who could do it are replaced by men who have only heard about it. Constantine's angel did its job a little too well. Here's what remains genuinely open, and it's sharper than the usual ancient puzzle. We know what Greek fire did in detail from people who stood there and watched it. It stuck to what it touched, it burned on the surface of the sea, it came out of a tube under pressure, and water made it worse. The delivery system has been rebuilt to a working standard by people who publish their drawings. What nobody has is the one thing any arsenal must have had, which is a list. How the oil was refined. How much resin? Whether sulfur belonged in the naval mixture at all or only in Anna's reed pipes. What lit it at the nozzle, reliably in a crosswind on a wooden deck. That absence is the real lesson, and it cuts against how we usually picture lost knowledge. We imagine a fire in a library, a shipwreck, a script nobody can read. Greek fire went the other way. It vanished because it was protected, and it was protected so successfully that when the protection stopped mattering, there was no one left holding more than a fragment. A recipe living in 4 heads inside one city is always a single bad century from becoming a story about angels. Byzantium got 500 years of survival out of that bargain, which is more than most secrets ever pay. And somewhere under Istanbul, or unopened in a Greek or Italian or Turkish collection, there may still be a page with a proportion written on it. 8 centuries of looking hasn't turned it up. That doesn't prove it was never writ. It might just mean the emperor won.